On March 31st, 2026, a bomber that first flew in 1952 crossed into Iranian airspace. Not a stealth aircraft, not invisible to radar, not fast. 8 engines, 185,000 pounds empty, a wingspan wider than the Wright brothers' entire first flight. The B-52 Stratofortress, a bomber designed to carry nuclear weapons against the Soviet Union, is currently dropping precision-guided bombs over Iran, and nobody shot it down. Here is exactly why. To understand why the B-52 is still flying in 2026, you need to understand what it was built to do in 1955. The Boeing B-52 Stratofortress first flew in 1952 and entered service with the U.S. Air Force. 1955 as a nuclear-armed strategic bomber designed to strike the Soviet Union. It was never fast. It was never stealthy. What it was, and still is enormous. The aircraft can carry up to 70,000 pounds of ordnance and is capable of launching the widest array of weapons in the U.S. inventory, including gravity bombs, cluster bombs, precision-guided missiles, and joint direct attack munitions. Think of it this way. A fighter jet is a scalpel, precise, fast, expensive to operate. The B-52 is a freight train that also happens to carry scalpels, lots of them. Its range and enormous payload capacity give the bomber distinct advantages in an operational environment where there are few or no operational air defenses. That last part is the key. The B-52 has one critical vulnerability. It needs someone else to clear the sky before it shows up. And in Iran, that's exactly what happened. The B-52 was not the first aircraft over Iran. It was the last. The opening wave was textbook. CAD, decapitation, stealth penetration, and corridor expansion. The B-52 was intentionally absent from this first wave. Here's what that sequence actually means. CAD stands for Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses. Before any bomber enters contested airspace, specialized aircraft, electronic warfare jets, anti-radiation missiles, and stealth fighters go in first. Their job is to find every radar, every surface-to-air missile battery, every command node that could track or engage the bombers coming behind them, and to destroy or blind those targets. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers conducted deep strikes from the continental United States, running 37-hour missions that targeted hardened missile caves and nuclear infrastructure. The B-2 was used because stealth was required to survive what was then an intact air defense system. Similarly, stealth F-35C fighters were launched from U.S. Navy carriers to establish local control corridors. Once partial suppression was achieved, non-stealth B-1B Lancers entered the airspace, conducting strike missions with their massive payload capacity. This is the progression. Stealth first, then semi-stealth. Then, once the air defense network has been degraded enough, the B-52. The B-52 is not a Day 1 or Day 2 airplane because it lacks stealth. It needs AIR superiority to fly over targets without risking damage from enemy air defenses. By the time B-52s crossed into Iranian airspace on March 31st, more than 11,000 targets had already been struck, allowing non-stealth bombers to operate with reduced risk at high altitude. The door wasn't just unlocked, it had been removed from its hinges. But here is where it gets technically interesting. Even with degraded Iranian air defenses, the B-52 does not just fly in and hope for the best. It has specific mechanisms that reduce its risk. Operational use of the B-52 over Iran involves high-altitude flight profiles above 15,000 meters, placing the bomber outside the effective range of most remaining Iranian short and medium-range air defense systems. 15,000 meters is roughly 49,000 feet, Most shoulder-fired missiles, the kind one soldier can carry and operate, max out around 15,000 feet. The medium-range systems Iran still has operational struggle significantly above 30,000 feet. The B-52 flies above all of it. The second mechanism is standoff delivery. The B-52's survival in a high-threat environment is entirely dependent on its standoff range. By launching stealthy cruise missiles from outside the enemy's anti-access area denial bubble, the B-52 bypasses the need for the low observable characteristics found in the B-21 Raider or B-2 Spirit. Early in the Iran campaign, before air superiority was established, B-52s never entered Iranian airspace at all. They flew to a point hundreds of miles away, released cruise missiles, and turned back. The missiles flew the rest of the way alone. The B-52s began the war by mounting attacks with standoff munitions, but they have recently been seen by aircraft spotters and in official imagery carrying JDAMs as Iran's air defense has weakened. JDAM stands for Joint Direct Attack Munition. It is a guidance kit attached to a conventional gravity bomb, a dumb bomb made smart with GPS. It is cheaper than a cruise missile, much cheaper, and the B-52 can carry dozens of them per sortie. The third mechanism is electronic warfare. Electronic warfare and suppression operations reduce the probability of successful engagement by remaining Iranian air defense systems. The B-52 does not fly alone. Accompanying EA-18G Growler aircraft, electronic warfare jets, and actively jam Iranian radar frequencies, flooding their screens with noise and false returns. A radar operator trying to track a B-52 through active jamming is essentially trying to find a specific person in a stadium, while someone is shining a spotlight in their eyes. There is a cost dimension to the B-52's role that rarely gets discussed, but it is central to why the aircraft is still here. The B-52 enables a lower cost per strike after the initial suppression, because even for the resource-rich United States, with the world's largest defense budget, sustainable attrition requires thriftiness. Every Tomahawk cruise missile costs $3.6 million. Every JSM-ER costs around $1.5 million. A JDAM guidance kit costs roughly $25,000, and it is attached to a bomb that costs a few $1,000s more. When a B-52 drops 20 JDAMs in a single sortie, it delivers the equivalent destructive capacity of multiple cruise missile strikes at a fraction of the cost. The transition reflects a cost and volume calculation, as bomber-delivered munitions provide greater payload per sortie than cruise missile strikes. This is also directly connected to the Tomahawk shortage problem. Every B-52 sortie carrying JDAMs is a sortie that does not consume another cruise missile from a stockpile that is already under pressure. The B-52 is not just a bombing platform. It is a logistics solution. The Air Force wants $48 billion to keep the B-52 flying until 2050. Without the upgrade, the fleet would be grounded by the 2030s as old engines fail and parts cannibalization accelerates. The upgrade program, called the B-52J, replaces the original Pratt & Whitney engines with new Rolls-Royce F-130 engines, which are more fuel-efficient and more reliable. Critically, parts are still being manufactured, which means the aircraft stops cannibalizing itself to stay airworthy. Air Force officials say that even with the legacy bomber's renewed use in Operation Epic Fury, modernization and retirement timelines are still absolutely reasonable. The B-21 and upgraded B-52 will be a necessity in European or Pacific theaters. The B-52 and the B-21 Raider will fly together. The B-21 goes first, stealth, day one, into defended airspace. The B-52 follows once the door is open, carrying the volume of munitions no stealth aircraft can match. It is the same playbook being used over Iran right now. A bomber from 1952, still doing its job in 2026. Not because nothing better exists, the B-21 exists, but because the B-52 does something the B-21 cannot. It carries more, cheaper, for longer. A 70-year-old aircraft, 8 engines from the Cold War, a wingspan designed for nuclear war against the Soviet Union, flying over Iran in 2026, dropping precision-guided bombs, unchallenged. Not because it is invisible, because everything that could have stopped it was already gone before it arrived.